Welcome to Some Stutter Law, Newfoundland and Labrador's first podcast about living with communication differences. Today, Some Stutter Law warmly welcomes Sean B.W. Parker. Now, a little bit about Sean. Welcome, Sean.
Thank you.
Sean B.W. Parker, M.A., is a British writer, artist, musician, and academic, specializing in cultural theory and justice reform. He has published a number of books and albums, won several awards, including a Koestler Arts Platinum for play The Wolfstrat Wire, and gave a TED Talk in 2013. He is editor of False Allegations Watch, a division of the Empower the Innocent organization, affiliated with the University of Bristol, and was born in Exeter in 1975. Well, Sean, you have quite the accomplishments here. You also talk about self-care now. Before we start, because you're so busy, how do you self-care for yourself?
I don't think about it very much. I just get on with it, you know.
Oh,
We're British, so I just don't think that much, just work.
just work, okay. Today, Some Stutter Law will be having a conversation with Sean about his recently published book called Compelling Speech, the Stammering Enigma. Sean, I read a review from Jack Nicholas from our volunteer book review stamina team, and he gives you a high five on your book, Compelling Speech, the Stammering Enigma. Jack says that it is so important that we have these explorations of what it means to stammer. We are too often sidelined and ignored. Too often, stammerers quite literally do not speak up, and that needs to change. Now, Jack also mentions that compelling speech is a powerful and very different contribution to this movement. Although his swashbuckling, iconoclastic approach makes me suspect he would hate to be considered part of any group, however diffuse and unplanned. So this is great. The synopsis of your book, Sean. Now, Sean, before we discuss your book, can you share a little about you as a person who stammers?
Yeah, sure. That was such a wide-reaching intro. I'm like, how to counter it. I've been stammering since I was 5, since about 1980, I guess. I have a speech therapist mother and a drama lecturer father who's passed now. So I come from that kind of linguistic household, which I think for some of us does feed into being a stammerer, person who stammers rather, and of course stutter for you guys. So all those interesting bits. Over my 48 years, I've had every kind of therapy, and I'm happy to report that the older you get, in my case, the easier it gets. Not because the stammer goes away or gets better or anything, but it becomes easier, and I stammer away more happily, just by getting older or whatever. But I have a deep love of English, and I think that that's connected to it as well. So that's the kind of thing I talk about in the book, is all the negative things that you and I might understand over years of doing it are also balanced by a certain lens with lots of positives which don't look like positives. And I'm not particularly a self-help kind of guy, but if it's seen in a self-help kind of way, that's great, you know. So what I like is reality and looking at things from the cultural lens of how things are. But we can get into that, I'm sure, in the chat, you know. But as I say, just to put a little thing, sort of a little extra for you, is that the best thing was teaching English for 10 years in Istanbul, as you said. At the end of that, I'm never going to be fluent, but I was in a really comfortable position with my stammer. The students didn't care, only I cared.
Mm.
And so it really helped that process of doing it. If anybody has the confidence to get there, it's a fascinating thing to study what happens in your own mouth as you teach it to other people.
Mm. Uh, uh, Sean, you mentioned that that as one gets older, one is more. I'm not too sure if you're more comfortable with it, with one's stutter or stammer, but you seem to be more comfortable. Am I correct?
That's it, I think. Yeah. I mean, we've all got our little tricks. As far as I know, every stammerer that I know, which isn't many anymore. I used to know more. Now it's few people I talk to on these things like you. It's like we have our ways of opening gates, kind of over the block. And in the past, that was seen as a replacement. Or you shouldn't be doing that. You shouldn't be having these little tricks to get into words because it's avoidance. I don't agree with that. I think the little tricks are very useful, and they don't become an extra tick that you're doing. Or they don't for me. I often have a little thing I put in just to make sure the block's gone, because it's the block that's the problem. It's the block that causes the tension for me. So I just kind of neutralise the blocks with a sound before I go in. And I mean, it's much easier to do this because we're talking about stammering. We might not hear us at all, but if I'm in a context where we're not talking stammering, if I'm talking justice reform or something, that's when it's different because you're talking to people who aren't expecting it. Basically, that's where things are really interesting for me.
Mm.
Not that I hide it ever.
Mm. In your book, you also talk about achieve natural fluency. Do you want to elaborate on that, Sean? Natural fluency. Is there such a thing?
um, well, the idea with stammering pride, etc., that thinking, is really good, really positive, all the rest of it. But I can't get past the fact of 48 that I'm more comfortable when I'm not stammering than when I am. So I don't know if I'll ever be able to get into that I'm happy stammering kind of mindset that we're encouraged to. And it's only because of the expectations of others. It's perfectly natural to have an expectation that people are going to be fluent because that's the 99%. So when you're not, it puts a social schism, which isn't their fault, and it's not your fault. It just is. And I prefer to talk about what is as opposed to what things should be. So natural fluency, I suppose, ease of communication. So if we can stammer easily, that's fluent in its way.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be a certain style of speaking. It's just taking the stress out of the whole thing can't be bad. That's what I mean.
Sean, can you share 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 a little bit about your book now, Compelling Speech: The Stammering Enigma. Now, what this based on the various reviews I've been reading, this book is it's different from your other books. So, do you want to just share what your book is about?
Absolutely. About 10 years ago, I gave a TED talk in Istanbul at the end of that 10 years of teaching, uh, stammering and creativity. Because I was asked to give a TED talk, I'm like, wow, there's a challenge. So, of course, I want to do that, being a writer. Um, so I chose stammering and creativity because those are two things that I can stand behind at that time of knowing what I'm talking about. So I put together this speech of 15 minutes, right brain, left brain, how it's seen in society, how English teaching helps. All the things we're talking about now, I put into this thing back then, but it was full of tension, and I was a bit of a. I used to drink a bit more than I do now. I don't hardly drink at all anymore, but then I was drinking too much, and so that would also come out in the stress that I was delivering this thing under. Um, 8 years later from that, I found myself in a place, well, in Dartmoor prison, as I'm sure we'll get onto it in a little bit. and I wanted to. I had the chance to do books, being a writer. So I'm like, right. So I basically started on an autobiography thing, but I wanted it to be an autobiography of a stammer, maybe stammerer, but stammer, the thing itself, and to talk about its influence on my, kind of my, for my life, but not with me as so much as the subject, because I prefer to talk about subjects. You know, I'm not really much of an always talking about myself. I prefer to talk about things, being an academic. So that's what I tried to do with this book. I got in all those right brain, left brain things, all the things I'm talking to you with the stammering pride thing, which I didn't talk about in the TED talk because it's rather new.
Mm.
And so I piled all that into 100 pages, tried to make it as fun as possible because I like my writing to be fun. I don't like it to be too draining or too dark. But things like the drinking and the problems with stammering, which we are all very familiar with, they might only be interesting to our community. So, or the parents, of course, of those who stammer. I'm very aware of that, and I keep that in mind. But my honesty, they seem to like very much. So I also kept it as honest as I possibly could, without being horrible to the stammering pride people, because that's not what I want to do, and that's not how I feel. I just want to put other perspectives about how we do disability, if we even see it as that.
Mm. Okay, I see what you're saying. Uh, you also talk about the in your book what stammering is and its causes. Do you we know the theories about stuttering and what causes it, but do you think differently about the causes, Sean, and its causes?
Yeah, I'm so interested in the subject because of the nature nurture thing and the speech therapists, who of course have a vested interest in what we do, what I do, what you do, and that they've been talking about that forever, and how this this the dammering pride scene actually kind of denies them of a job, of a role. I find really
Mm,
interesting, and I know how they feel about that. They're sort of they don't go there because it's too uncomfortable to go there, but it's interesting because it's like what SP is saying is that we're going to do it anyway, whatever you, and which is great. Um, where am I going with the origins? Is it the nature or the nurture? Well, it's a complete mix from far as I can tell. Um, it's it, I have my father was a clustering stammerer, not a blocking stammerer. He would cluster away like this, but we never referred to it back in the 70s and 80s as a stammer. It was just how he anxiously communicated and talked. Um, and after he died, all of 20th century behaviours were very blocked compared to 21st century ones. And I quite like transparency, openness, all those things. So I wanted to take what he's got, which I've inherited, but I've inherited the blocks, and it's almost like a thing that you don't know why it's happening, and so that would be the genetic element of it. Definitely, it's him helping me do that. But then the upbringing part, where the two of them, my parents and my brother, bless him, would basically be chattering away in a very intellectual, middle class kind of way. And there I am as the youngest baby, observing, not chipping in, occasionally trying to chip in. And when I did, my brother wouldn't have it and would slap it down either physically or verbally.
mm,
So that I do talk about that in the book, though I don't dwell. Well, no, I do dwell a bit. It's a thing, but I don't want to make him feel too bad. But he's aware of what it was. It wasn't chronic. It was me turning it chronic by being sensitive, and this will happen to sensitive individual
mm,
children. Not that they aren't all that, but yeah. And I think there's an area of cosmology as well, Greg, where it's like the person that you are, the spirit, is a third, which isn't really dealt with in nature nurture. that spirit's not to do with my dad, and it's not to do with my brother. It's to do with sort of the universe or God, if you
Mm-hmm.
want that. Whatever your belief, your spirit is something else, and that's another part of your personality. And I think that kind of chips into what the stammer is too, how you deal with other people.
So, Sean, do you feel that it's interesting that you mentioned the spirit, one spirit. Do you think the as a person with the stammer, is it in conflict a lot with who we are, the physical, the mental? Is there a conflict?
When we, I can't, because it's so hard with stammering community to say we, because it is
Yeah.
also different, isn't it? But okay, when I am completely as one and just charging forward in a very confident way, so firstly, it's quite intimidating for people because it's a force of nature, and you can't live at that speed all the time because it's not. You have to adjust sort of socially for various things that don't tolerate that. But when I am like that, or when I get angry, which is very very rare, but when I am, there's no stammering. It's all just very direct. Blah, bang, 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 bang. There's no schism in the mind. And the stammering comes from a schism, but intelligence comes from a schism too. If you don't have the schism, you don't really have intelligence. You just have the monomania. So every stammerer I've ever met, person who stammers, has been very intelligent and usually sensitive and many thoughts, many different ideas about what's going on, which indicates intelligence. So it's you don't really want to do away with that just because you want a bit more fluency,
Hmm.
you know. So yeah, there's definitely lots of divides, which I'm very proud of and very happy about, and I wouldn't get rid of just for more
Mm.
fluency.
Do you feel, Sean, that if we address the emotional component of stuttering, below the surface of the iceberg, do you think stuttering would, it would be as intensive? I mean, we would stutter less, in other words. Well, what are your thoughts about that?
If
No,
we did what?
if we address the emotional component of stuttering, which I feel as a person who stutters is a huge component that is not being addressed. And sometimes I think and as I know, sometimes I shouldn't use the word we, but I know for myself that the emotional component really impacts the intensity of my stutter. What are your thoughts?
Um, well, sort of. Firstly, being British, we don't have as many emotions as Americans. North Um, what I mean by that though is not as on the nose as it sounds. It's we do kind of hide it much more than you guys are brilliant with it. So we have to get over that barrier first. And how I see emotions is they're so important to deal with, and you guys are way ahead of it and counselling and all sorts of things. I'm very open, kind of emotionally, for an English person. So I've got a head start on lots of other people who love this kind of talking because they're like, "Why you're so? How can you be so open about it?" I'm like, "Water off a duck's back, no problem. Things happen, you talk about them, you know." Um, what I find the intersection I find interesting is expectations and emotion. Um, the unhappiness that I kind of sort of notice in myself and in others is about unmet expectations. So if we can get rid of enough of those and just enjoy the process, that is where the happiness comes from. So it's like the process first, and then and emotions such as happiness will follow. Just from, as I say, if you expect fluency and you don't achieve it, then you're going to be sad. If you don't expect fluency and just speak in whatever way you're speaking, it's a much more healthy way of doing it. I talked about that in the TED talk. When you don't pre-think, when we don't pre-think, when I don't pre-think, there is no stammer to note, and there isn't the absence of a stammer either. It's just not a thing. You're just talking, as I am at the moment with you. It's very very much in the moment, and that's how I try to live now. So obviously that's not possible and as a younger man, it was absolutely impossible because there's loads of pre-thought, and now I don't live in that place anymore, possibly because of other experiences I've had.
Mm.
So I don't
Oh,
think I've answered.
you have, Sean. Now, do you feel that
Sure.
speech therapy? There's a lot of pros and cons about speech therapy, and do you feel that speech therapy can be a hindrance at times in terms of trying to really sort of stick to one's target? And then if one fails the targets, there's a lot of emotional component. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, I do. It's interesting. I'm trying to think back to being a younger man and child when I was having that kind of speech therapy, and I was so stubborn that um, I I didn't know what they were doing. I didn't know why they were doing it. Uh, by the time it seemed that the stammer wasn't going away in the eyes of my parents, then I was an angry teenager and not interested in it anyway, and they were basically ignoring it in the hope that at some point, and it did go away for a year, by the way, 15, 16, when I started to sing in a band, it disappeared for a year, and then it came back with a vengeance a year later for whatever reason. So it was only a couple of years later, I said to myself, I need to get, because I couldn't say my own name. I couldn't say, I was really blocking in a depressive way at 28, 29. And I'm like, I need to sort this out to be a teacher and to have an easier rest of my life. And so I went to the City Lit in London and got therapy, but they introduced it in a way that was so different from the 80s and to a little boy, which was repeating the sounds and all that, which I recognise as being useful. Um, the toolkit approach Carolyn Cheeseman and her friends at the City Lit were doing, voluntary stammering, all these psychological techniques and
Mm-hmm.
an explanation of what we're doing. Like right now, looking at myself speaking to you is an incredibly effective way of speech therapy. I don't understand it. I love it. It's like the behind the ear thing. It somehow shortcuts the pre-thought that we're thinking about, and God knows how. But it's really interesting. I hope there's a study on it. But um, that I didn't give myself expectations of an outcome to get from those things because I was doing it under societal sufferance. Okay, you want me to have speech therapy? Let's see what happens. So I didn't. Basically, as a younger person, I don't think I gave myself a chance to do it. I didn't think it was going to go anywhere because basically I don't trust other professionals to do anything properly. I think that's probably what was. So yeah, I had
No.
to get it over myself, and I suppose I have done that. But yeah.
Mm. You know, your book, Sean, also raises the question about when someone who stammers can expect society to change around. The difficult question is when someone who stammers can expect society to change around them, and when they should be prepared to accept their condition and adapt to
Mm.
society. Do you want to elaborate on that? It's a challenging question. Like, do we, like we as people with stutter, that's us, that's one of the reasons why we hide our stuttering is just to be accepted, to have access to able body benefits in society, or do we just be ourselves?
Um, Absolutely, the person should be themselves. Um, that self is so multifaceted in society that and that it's not possible to put into a nutshell with any disability rights, but with ours, with speaking, because you can't tell until we start speaking, can you? That's the thing about stammering, and that's why we're so quiet and all the rest of it
Mm-hmm.
when we are. Um, I'm attempting to get, I'm not halfway stuttering. I'm actually trying to think about how to answer your question because it's really important, and I've expressed it there in the book. What I'm trying to say in that is that society is more important than the disability I'm going through. And I'm not sure that disability, I'm not decrying them, I'm just not entirely sure that disability rights trump society's expectation of fluency, especially when it can be improved, I do inverted commas, the way we can. We can kind of uh, make our stutters better. So, it, not that they always do, but it can be done. So and of course, I'm talking as a stammerer, so I'm not having a go at the community. I'm just trying to be real about what we do. If I was to get up in the House of Commons tomorrow and give a speech, they are in their rights to expect me to speak fluently. And if I don't, sadly, the the impression given is weakness, and that's what I'm trying to get over.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's nothing weak or shy about me. I'm happy in public. I'm happy giving talks and that. But people will think, oh, poor Sean, his stammer. Well, that's not who I am. So it's like that's the problem. The expectations of the kind of person that you are. So if I can go along with outreach about this, I mean, what I want to go out with is that we are multifaceted people with many things going on: the arts, justice reform, everything else, and then as a stammerer. And so, and that's I've got 8 books out there. This is just one of them, and the rest of them are about kind of culture and sort of music and things. So we are lots of different people. We're not just stammerers, is what I'm trying to say with that. And we can go so doomy, and I don't do doomy. I do cheerfulness because I know lots of stammerers who are quite cheerful too. So
True, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's very nuanced. It's very tricky to put my finger on, but I hope that your audience try get what I mean.
Yeah. Some people who stutter, and I know a number of people that stammer, that that they are very accomplished, much like yourself. They've written books, they degrees and so on and so forth. But although they have accomplished a lot, they still feel, in one sense, less than. They don't appreciate their accomplishments because of the stammer. What are your thoughts about that? Because thinking about how much you have accomplished in life
Yeah,
so
no,
far.
I'm same as that because you never get there. If you're a billionaire, you still don't get there, right? This is why Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos keep doing things. It's because you never get there. So you probably don't want to think about the object of fluency or the object of living on Mars, because those objects are potentials that come across as I'm some sort of a Buddhist. I'm not. It's just about really being an existentialist. The activity of speaking to you right now is much more enjoyable than thinking in a year's time I'm going to be fluent and I'm going to rule the world. That's an unreal and pointless thing. And even if I did have those two things come true, I wouldn't be any happier. So that's the mental jump I think might come from actually going to one of the darkest sort of situations you can go to, and you're going through that possibly. And so, um,
Mm-hmm.
like I say, I still stammer, but the expectations of the high achievers you're talking about there, I mean, that's part of the problem of our cultures being not not about to have a go at hypercapitalism, but having those worldly achievements as a thing to aim for isn't for me. Never has been, thank goodness. But doing an active, creative work, which is what we're doing now, as far as I'm concerned, this is as creative as this painting behind me, mine, and this book next to me,
Mm-hmm.
which we're talking about. This is the same as that, and that's why it really is in the moment, I think, and that's the mindfulness they talk about, isn't it? But I prefer existentialism to mindfulness because it's a bit more.
Mm-hmm. Sean, what would be the main message in your book, Compelling Speech to Stammering Enigma? What would be the key message for us as people who stammer,
Good question.
stutter?
People who stammer are multifaceted, and the stammering is just it's a part of what they do. It's not a part of what they are, and it's not a part of identity politics, which are not a positive thing, in my academic opinion, after much study about this, which is why I respect disability rights, but I want people who stammer, especially when they're adults, let's not worry about the kids, but the adults, don't put yourself in a box because we're many, many, many different things, and the stammering is just one of them. And possibly, actually getting into this chat with just you tonight is I've gone to this thinking of let's not concern ourselves with expectations of the fluency or even happiness. Just do the moment, because that's a bit of a message, isn't it? But that's the essential message of the book: existentialist communication, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Just to be, just to be in the moment and really appreciate the moment. In
Yeah,
other
yeah,
words, and
exactly
yeah.
that. And we are much more than just the way we communicate. It's a beautiful part of what we are. Loads of people stammers. Everybody knows are can be seen as cute and soft, and they are an automatic beacon of the vulnerability, which the world does need more of. And we can use that as a superpower if we want. But I just distrust all the new language, But experience teaches me that expectations of anything will end in disappointment because we've got something neurological going on, and the neurology doesn't really care about expectations. They only sort themselves out just by doing. So I just do, and that's what makes me happy now.
Do you feel that there's a such thing as a cure for stammering?
Well,
I'm laughing. This is a tongue-in-cheek question,
you
Sean.
probably know the answer. Yeah, it's that's an expectation again, isn't it? So no,
Yeah.
it doesn't have a cure because there's nothing to cure, and you shouldn't want to cure it. It's just a way we speak, and it's doing that way more comfortably without the angst that it gives us. So the angst is the problem. It's not the stammer. So if we can get rid of the angst, then you might be bumbling away with some blocks
Mm-hmm.
and whatnot, but it's not life ending. And that's the main thing, just like going through. And that's the good thing about getting old, that I hope your younger viewers will appreciate, is that it does get better, with quote marks, because you just sort of internalize it. Like it's just it's a part of who you are, how you speak. I wouldn't want to get rid of it now. I don't go out there sort of proudly trying to make people uncomfortable in a social situation, which a stammer can do with certain people. But because it's a problematic thing to do that. I think. But at the same time, you can still be proud of who you are, and adjust things with some sensitivity to what things require.
Mm. Towards the end of your book, you sort of end up with a little bit of a transcript from your TED talk. Uh, Go on, just go into the world unafraid. I mean, that's a powerful statement, Sean. It's a powerful statement, but for a lot of people to stutter, that's the challenge. Is to go on, just go into the world and unafraid. That's self-disclosure, trying to block out what people think, and just be yourself. Do you want to talk about that for a bit?
Oh, you've got it exactly there. I suppose it's the idea of what we're talking about tonight, done a few years ago, which is just um, the only thing to fear itself is fear. It's a cliche, but it's a good one because it works. There's that word over there that you can't say. At the moment, I've got difficulties with L's. You have a couple of months with a difficult letter, and that could be anything. At sort of 25, it was B. I couldn't say the letter B, Ben, so I changed my name to Sean because could say it, and I can't say Sean that well now. But moreover, it's L,
Mm.
and so if I see legal coming towards me, and I have to say legal to a stranger, not in a conversation about stammering like with you now, where I can stammer away happily, with that legal person, I need to have other things in mind. I need to think about how he's seeing me. They are seeing me, and all those things, you can't ignore them. You can't ignore how that person might see you. You can sort of say, I can be whoever I want, yes, but there will still be consequences to that where they're making up conclusions about you. And that is a very, very challenging thing. You can take them to court for it, but it's very hard to prove that a person's been discriminating against you. So, you just have to deal with the world, the reality as it is. And that just means attacking a word and just bumbling through it, stammering through it, doing whatever to it. And of course, the more times you do that, the easier. I mean, the best advice to any stammerer is just to speak away in whatever way you're speaking, stammering or not. And that was the English teaching lesson. Just blah, blah, blah. If you like words, there's lots of stammerers who don't like speaking, of course. And though the ones that I know actually do love speaking and do love English, or the process of language, and that's a part of the problem. And that is what intrigues me the most. I don't know about you, Greg, but almost every person who stammers that I know has a real deep appreciation for language, and I want to sort of exploit that more in these kind of things in these books and whatnot. Because what we do, the problem that we have is linguistically based. So, well, let's look at the problem in a different way. What is it about this thing that we're doing where we're having a bad dance with language, a problematic dance as far as we see when you block? We can't pretend that block is a positive, because it's not. So when you just treat that block in a different way, then it becomes more of a dance. And that's kind of how to zap it away the more and more you do it. I'm talking utter rubbish now, but I think I'm trying.
Oh no, Sean, definitely not. Yeah. So, Sean, would you you also talk about in your book or about being a survivor. Do you consider yourself a
Is
survivor?
that what I say in the book?
Well, no, this is part of one of the
Oh,
reviews.
right. Well, I was going to say that's
This
not my
person,
language.
no.
Well, I've been through loads, so yeah, but I just don't see myself as having been through loads, because it's just how I live. I just live at a full volume, and I like being like that, and I've done that since I was 15, since I discovered music. But I've had a stammer in hand all that way through. So um, there's what was your question? Sorry.
Like do you consider yourself? I mean, like all people start go through a lot of challenges, and I mean, for me as well, I also consider myself a survivor as well, and like a survivor in the sense that surviving is also a double-edged sword. It's been a challenge for me as a person who stutters, but it also has been a benefit for me as well, a blessing. So where are you
I,
on both sides?
it's a very good point. It's really true. Yeah, survivor of some racism as a boy, believe it or not. Kind of going to school in a Welsh country as an English child is you can get some real hassle, and so that was the start of the abuse of being othered, and then also being a stammerer there too. There was an element of that which I tend to ignore, but then kind of later on, I was um, falsely accused of a crime and wrongfully convicted, which is why I've got the speciality that
Mm.
I have now. So I was a victim of that too, and the stammer came back with a vengeance, and I couldn't speak for 6 months. I was advised not to speak in trial. So yeah, I was absolutely battered by that experience. So to the extent that I'm here, you could say survivor, and it's just the fact that it's a part of life as well because of the political times we're living in. And I do prefer to look at things from a political lens than an emotional one, because the politics you can actually do something about, but the emotions is subjective. Everyone's going to be different from the moment to moment. At least with the politics, you can get some strategy, which is why I'm interested in the stammering pride as much as I might in Me Too or other political, cultural aspects that I write about. So, trying to pull all these things together, I definitely am a survivor. It's just I would never describe myself as that because I just don't like sympathy, basically, I suppose.
I see. So, Sean, what made you decide to become a writer?
Oh, I didn't decide. It's a compulsion. It's definitely deeply connected to the stammer, and I love that. Um, what I couldn't used to say, I would get out in a song, and then a poem, and then into music writing. The love I have for music, I was able to construct into a paragraph, and then that would become books. And then before you know it, you have an ability to write all different formats. So I've got a book of poetry coming out next year. There's this. It's like a autobiographical memoir, compelling speech, and a collection of my justice reform writings. I think we're going to try to publish at the end of this year. And the great thing about that discipline, writing, which is definitely it's the hand version of what every stammerer can do without blocking, isn't it? So it's obviously you can express as you wish, but it's just another sort of form of doing it. There's dyslexic stammerers too, I know. So um, it's just that the more you do it, like with speaking, the more you do writing, the better you get with that. And if you have a compulsion to do it, you don't. People can get writer's block. I get that, but I don't. So thank goodness, I just open the laptop, open my pad, and start kind of writing, and the ideas come and come. So
Mm.
so I attempt to do the writing like I do the speaking, and the more you do it, the better it gets. So I always love coming back to a piece, and
Mm.
and the more I talk about this book and the the dammering with people like you, the more I enjoy doing this as well because it's
Mm.
doing things as a positive.
I read somewhere that that you had mentioned that an author or a person writing their book should not edit their own work.
Hmm. Hmm.
Now, did you say that, or did I misread it?
I did. That's
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, that's an interview I did with the table read, isn't it? um,
that's right, yeah.
yeah. What I meant by that is, as you write, just write from the heart, because when you look back at it the next day, you're going to think, "Oh no, what did I do?" You're going to find that you don't want to edit out anything, but people tend to self-edit all the time because they're scared of what they're going to write. So just don't be scared. Just write away, like speaking away. Wow, yeah, that does tie in, doesn't it? You just get it out there. In time, look back on it and go, could I change anything about what I've written? And you'll find usually that you don't actually want to, and it's the weirdness that you want to keep in. And there's it's a reference to the stammering with that, isn't it? We're not communicating possibly in a conventional way, in a fluent way. Big signs. Distrust fluency, by the way. Persuasive speakers are the most distrustful people on the planet. So I think the stammerer has a lot more innate kind of trust in them um, than society gives credit for. So yeah, this is a new angle I hadn't thought about before. Of like, the more you do these things, the better you become at them. And if there are mistakes, look at them afterwards. Don't worry about the mistake while you're doing it.
Mm. And also, Sean, one of the interviews, uh, someone mentions, I can't remember his name now, but while the stammer was and apparently is often the cause of bullying, it can also be the bully, are just two random examples.
Mm.
The stuttering can be a bully. Why don't you elaborate on that a bit?
Yeah, that was to Jack Nicholas kind of picking up on that.
The stammer, okay.
Yeah. Um, the stammer is in control of our communication. It feels like it's in control of our communication as a younger person. And when, let's face it, it is all the way through our lives to a certain degree, possibly easing with a bit of luck, you know. So it has control over you. So it essentially, because it's external, it's inside your mouth somewhere. So it's it's not a part of you. It's lives within you. And if you're able to control it, you wouldn't do it. So it's like it's this kind of strange dichotomy of what's going on. So in that case, it's bullying you, in the terminology I'm using there. And but then uh, you can also become the bully when if that upsets your inner core enough, that can then go and affect other people, just in a friendship or in anger. It's a perfect the natural thing to get angry but when it's actually coming from about yourself, that sort of has to be worked on as well. So the speech therapists, as people go forward, could help in their helping people's emotional reactions. Not always men; it can be both sexes. I just don't know very many female stammerers. I know they're out there, of course. I just don't know very many of them. So, but with the men, I've met many who just have a rage, and not, of course, not all of them violent. It's just you hope that they won't become violent, So they can accidentally become a bully. The stammer itself is a bully. These because stammering pride is attempting to turn it all into a positive. Well, okay, but you have to make sure that you also look at the negative connotations as well. That's the emotionally kind of mature thing to do.
When you talk about stammering pride, now are you also talking about being a confident stammerer? Is there a difference?
Um, so I got this term off Kirsten Howells of Stammer, who I love to bits. She's the head honcho, assistant CEO, I think now, of Stammer, and she was talking to me about the stammering pride kind of movement, because I'm coming to this as I'm not an activist. I'm a writer, but I'm coming to this a bit kind of later in life, as opposed to being steeped in stammering culture forever. And so I understand with kind of pride itself, uh, being open about your homosexuality and going out there into life and going, this is what I am, deal with it, world. And it's had lots of positive results, because it's good to be yourself, good to live your best life. Um, that applies to stammering too, of course. But the gay people don't often want to change what they do. So that okay, in the past they might have been compelled to by society, but they don't actually. It's just what they are, and I'm happy with that. I'm saying, it, when I do stammer, I'm not as happy as when I don't. So it's not really an orientation. It's a thing, as I've said, that's going on inside you. So it's coming to accommodations is absolutely the healthiest thing. If you do stammer, great. If you don't stammer, great. And to make a person feel bad because of their stammer is a wicked, nasty thing to do. But honestly, I don't ever see that as an adult. People are massively sympathetic all over the place. I don't see the bullying if it happens. And kids are going to bully anyway. That's very unfortunate. But it's out of my remit, because it's a teacher's issue happening over there. But as an adult, what you're going to get is people going, "Oh, poor you," and that's the last thing I want. I want to be taken as a serious academic. Not, isn't Sean doing well? That is not.
Correct, yeah.
That's what I'm doing this for, is to get rid of that stuff.
So, Sean, compelling speech, the stammering enigma. So what has the response been so far from the audience?
Yeah, it's the reviews that you love as a writer, and I loved Jack kind of Nicholas's, because he wasn't completely. This is a work of genius. It's fabulous. 5 stars. It's heartbreakingly good, because I don't want that. That's boring. He's read the thing and gone, this is very interesting, very problematic, and very well written at times. And you can't say anything better than that to me, because I'm not a reader pleaser. I'm not kind of writing to make the reader happy. I'm kind of writing to make them think, and also to enjoy some beautiful language when it works. And he totally got the answer to your question is a good review, well written. Also one by Joanne Williams, much shorter, but she also got to the nub of it. She's a writer for the Spectator here. She did this wonderful little review, and those things are the best, because it's touched them. They've gone what they really think about it, and then you're able to share that on social media, which is obviously lovely to let people know. Of course, it will stimulate some cells, it might, but if it doesn't, it doesn't matter because you know you've done good work. And these things aren't Harry Potter, I'm not expecting them to work like that. But talking to you about that book, and if your people go, well, that sounds interesting enough, that's a real achievement, and that's what outreach of this stuff's all about, isn't it?
Hmm. When you compare the, I mean, well, I'm not too sure this is a fair question, but when can you compare this book to your all other books in terms of bringing you some a sense of pride, accomplishment? Is there like a scale when
Ah,
you compare?
yes, no, it's a ideal question because I have much more ownership over this than the other nine, uh, eight of my own and a couple contributed to. They are about culture and music, and the exercise in those is to go, hey, don't I know a lot about this, and don't you like how I write about it? There you go, reader, and that's okay. That's an art to doing that. This thing is an exposition of a life in 100 pages, and going, I've had enough of not talking about this, and it's important to me. And if you like the artistry I make, well, this is very much contributory towards that. So it's yeah, I have a much deeper degree of ownership to this one than I do to the others. And I'm not trying to sell this more because it's the most recent. It's just how I feel about it because it's an autobiography, essentially.
Mm.
As I say, autobiography of a stammer, but
Mm.
that's me within that. So
Mm.
yeah, that's a really good question. I do have more ownership of this than the others.
Mm. Now you mentioned that you're working on a personal bi- biography now. When do you think that will be published?
Did
Your
I?
own story. Yeah.
Oh, right. No, okay. Yes. Um, I'm right in the middle of a really exciting creative renaissance. So I'm really loving it, and I'm enjoying, like we're talking about, the reception to compelling speech. So depending on people's appetite for such a thing and the amount of interest I can get in that happening, it could be out next year. I don't see why not. I've constantly got things on the go, so it's a thing that I could really uh, work up and get out quite quickly. But I obviously want to make sure these things are done correctly. It's just I'm a self-managing kind of writer, so I like to schedule my own stuff to my own schedule. But I would
Of
love to get
course.
out something like that next year. That'd be great. Why not?
Yeah. Sean, before we close now, do you have any last words for our listening audience? Any?
Uh, I think we covered lots of what I wanted to in this wonderful chat. And I've uncovered things from speaking to you. So that's what I love about this process. I think the audience has worked out what I think about expectations is that they are the problem, and the moment is where you get your joy, and that's not a bad thing. That's existentialism in the 1950s, and kind of for mindfulness now. But mindfulness is a slightly different version of what I'm talking about because I'm not talking about doing it in a anxious way. And getting rid of the anxiety and getting rid of the expectations should be a goal if you need a goal. But better than that is probably not thinking. I think not thinking is a really good way of helping with people who stammer and have all kinds of other emotional problems. Maybe think a little less. We're always encouraged to think loads by culture. I'm saying think a little less could be a way forward, maybe.
Mm. Well, Sean, this this has been a great conversation, and you do definitely have a nice like a positive like a spirit about yourself. You really do. I mean, so you have a very uh, welcoming spirit about yourself, and you know you also come across with with a semblance of peace of mind. You know what I mean? So you're very open, you're very honest.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Greg. That's really nice to hear, and yourself too. So it's like speaking to a lovely American gent, and we should all have a bit more of that in our lives. We don't get much of a chance
Oh,
of that in England. So.
okay. Thanks, Lashana. We will be in touch again. Okay.
I look forward to hearing it all. Thank you, man.
Take care now. Bye.